Good afternoon. I'm Bob Margulies, a former president of the Hudson County Bar, and it's my pleasure to present the oral history of Judge Barry Sarkisian. Barry and I he started a couple of years before me, so we're of the same generation. And Barry, I guess prior, we have something in common, because prior to becoming a judge, and when you first became, I guess, a lawyer, you were in the service, right?
That's correct, yes.
And you were in the Medical Service Corps, as was I.
Yeah.
And not understanding how someone trained as a lawyer ended up in the Medical Service Corps, but I guess that's the Army. Huh?
It's an enigma. We discussed that just briefly, talking and chit-chatting about different things, but I went to St. Peter's College, and I was part of the ROTC program. And then this is, again, graduating from St. Peter's in 1969. Vietnam was still going on, but at its sort of end stages. And I got a deferral for law school, which extended another 3 years to 1972. And at the time I became available to perform my active duty service, there wasn't a need, because Vietnam had thrown down, it calmed down. So I had to find a reserve slot, and the only reserve slot available was in the mechanized infantry in Newark, New Jersey. And the only slot available was the Medical Service Corps. So there I am with a law degree, and I'm being told by the commander, the only slot open is for Medical Service Corps officer. He says, don't worry, we'll put the order in. And there I was in Fort Sam Houston, as I understand you served, getting my training to become a Medical Service Corps officer. And that's what I did for my stint in the National Guard for 5 years.
So you're Hudson County through and through, went to Memorial High School?
Right, yeah. Grew up in West New York, 57th Street. Mom and dad and my brother. Went to PS5, Memorial High School, graduated in 1965. Because that's part of these oral histories, which, as you know, I've been involved in. And it's like, not too many people that may be watching it even know and haven't been born in 1965. That's when I graduated from high school and went on to college at St. Peter's College in New York Law. So yes, I'm a memorial guy, a men guy, from 1965.
So you were admitted to practice in New Jersey in what year?
That was in 1973. I had passed the bar, but I was serving in the Army in San Antonio, Texas, and when I got back in 1973, I was admitted to bar in 1973. And
I understand you were editor of the Law Review at New York Law School?
Yes, I was. I was the note and comment editor for the New York Law School Law Review, and at the time, one of the things that I have hanging in my office was the submission of my note that qualified me to become the note and comment editor, was dealing with the First Amendment right of the burning of the American flag in public. And at the time, there was a pending case before the U.S. Supreme Court. So I said, oh, why not? Let me submit it to the Supreme Court. And I did for the justices at that time. And one of the things hanging on my wall, and again, here's a connection between where we are right now, the Brennan Courthouse.
He wrote the opinion.
He wrote the opinion, and he sent me a letter, Dear Barry, thanking me for the submission of the comment on this case. And, William Brennan signed it. So that's something I cherish.
As an aside, Justice Brennan in 1947 was the assignment judge, sat in this courthouse,
right.
And I came up with the idea of naming it for him, and we actually had him, as you recall, come here.
That's right. That's right.
And be honored. He was a historic figure from here, who lives in history.
Yes, very true.
Too bad we don't have him back. Moving on about you. So, in your early years, you were in municipal government as a lawyer. You worked for various in West New York, I believe.
Yes. Well, to start from the very beginning, when I got out of the Army, there I am I'm saying, where do I start? I mean, the aside to that was when I was stationed in San Antonio, Texas, I decided before I got down to the brass and tacks of being a lawyer and opening an office, I said, well, let me explore a little bit. And I went west. I went up the California coast. This is in this 1970 Camaro that my dad had given me to travel to Texas, and I had there. And I fell in love with California. And I actually set up an interview to see an attorney. His name doesn't tell you this, but he's an Armenian descent named Charles Gary, who was a very important attorney in the trials that were going on involving Abby Hoffman and all these other individuals that are protesting the Vietnam War.
They were the dissidents.
The dissidents, exactly. So he agreed to see me, and I said, is there any position open in your firm? I mean, my life could have been changed drastically. He says, I wish I could tell you there is, but everybody wants to live in San Francisco. That's where his office is. He says, I'm sorry, there isn't. So that had me travel back to New Jersey, cross country in my car, and I opened my own practice, and I had the support at the time. You probably remember, this is 1973. If you got a municipal position as a part-time lawyer, as a part-time lawyer, you still had the right to open up your own practice. So my first year of practice in early 1973 was first finding an office, which I did by seeing attorney, dear friend Stanley Lowe, who had an office over Albee's Toy Store, which is no longer there on Bergen Avenue, West New York, and he rented me an office in his complex. And the thing I can tell you about that first office, you never forget your first office as a lawyer, right? My first office was an interior office with a door, no windows, just paneling. So he says, sorry about the no windows, Barry, but here. And he put a picture of a window and he posted it on the wall. So that was my first office, part-time. And Libro Murata, at that time, who was Corporation Counsel for the City of Union City, and we just honored him in our Memorial Committee ceremony, which took place yesterday, was the Corporation Counsel, and I applied for him for a part-time position. He says, I know you, I remember you were there on the reform movements, working as a law student. He says, how'd you like to be the Union City Municipal Prosecutor? So that started my career in public employment, which was always a part of my practice. In 1973, and I had that position for several years. And then I went out to positions in West New York and Guttenberg. Ultimately became a town attorney in West New York and Maynard-Fino, and other positions in Union City, etc. But I always had my own practice.
Oh, you also had a vibrant practice. Tell us a little bit about the kinds of matters that you dealt with.
All right, well, again, they were small firms, first myself, and then I had a friend of mine, unfortunately, is deceased now, Drew Transact. We opened a partnership and established that in Hoboken. The types of practices we would handle essentially were what I'll call, and you don't hear this too much now, our general practice matters, which ran the gamut from litigation, usually personal injury action representing plaintiffs, to transactional matters, standard real estate closings. I got into the field of doing estate litigation through some contacts I had with New York attorneys, and a combination of litigation and transactional work was what made up the business, and my partner had that as well. Those were general practice firms, okay, which you see now less and less over the years.
Now, you have been president of the Hudson County Bar,
right,
as a and you were also of the North Hudson Lawyers Club.
That's right. Yep.
And you served on the Ethics and the Fee Arbitration Committee, so you've certainly put yourself out there in terms of public service for lawyers as well.
Well, we can get a little bit when we talk about the concept of giving back. I always felt, and I was taught by my parents, especially my mom, to you're a lawyer, it's good, you want to be successful, but always think about giving back to someone who you can help, whether do some pro bono service or serving in one of these associations. And it's always been a part of my DNA, which I thank my parents for. And yeah, I enjoy being the president of the Bar Association, which you've been as well. And the North Hudson Club, you were a South Jersey city guy, so you weren't familiar with that club, but that was it wasn't a bar association, it was a club. And those used to be wonderful, wonderful experiences with some of the senior members of our bar, having our monthly meeting at Lewis Restaurant on Kerrigan Avenue in Union City. That's not there anymore, of course. And then the ultimate event of that club was the Hudson County's version of Essex County's Bon Ton, which, if you remember, the show, and I don't know if anybody's watching this video remembers that, but Bon Ton, which doesn't take place anymore, and North Hudson would do a show, a spoof, where attorneys would play roles, sometimes in drag, excuse the expression, and poke fun at other judges, usually judges who may be in the higher venues. So, and we invite them to the event, and that was...
they were sometimes over the top.
Yeah, we had that in Schützen Park, which is no longer there either, in Oak Bergen, New Jersey, but sometimes we had some good fun. Most of the judges who were poked fun at took it in good nature, good fun, and it was great. It was also the real good fun part of that was, because I was part of most of the shows, some small or major role was the preparation, the rehearsals. And we'd gather once a week in Schützen Park and get our band, which consisted of one piano player, Nino, who would just take songs and do parodies on them, and you know, it was a fun event.
That was a different kind of a bar at the time too,
Yeah.
right?
The one event I remember quickly is we had, you remember, some people watching this don't remember, we had a Superior Court Judge, Richard Connors, and we were poking fun at him, and at the time he was in the family part doing divorces and stuff, and he was a rather large man. So one of the signs we carried on the stage when we were spoofing him, someone played him, I forget who it is, and again, he was involved in family law and divorces. One sign we had that Judge Connors is not equitably distributed. Just making fun of his body shape, you know. So you know, that's the type of stuff we did. I'm sure, and I remember us poking fun at some Supreme Court justices as well. So it was a good show.
In 2005, you ascended to the bench.
Yes.
And tell us about that experience. You sat in the law. You sat as chancellor, as the chancery judge.
Yes.
You sat on complex transactions.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about that experience and how you utilized your general practice experience as a judge.
Well, we've had this discussion privately over lunch or at other times in private settings. We've had discussions about, you know, how the face of the judges that were appointed in our generation versus the faces of judges appointed now. So, in our day, being a seasoned trial lawyer was something that was really required. So keep in mind that at the time I ascended the bench, I had been practicing for approximately 30 years. I mean, if I got my math right, yeah, about 30 years, a little over 30 years. 32 years. Thanks for the math. So, you know, I had, you know, I don't know, maybe 50 or so trials under my belt, and just being in the courtroom, handling cases, and knowing how to respond, how to prepare a brief, how to read a brief, how to make an argument. So when you're on that side of the table, and now you have to get on the other side of the table and be the judge, was for me, it was something I looked forward to and totally enjoyed from 2005 until I reached the age of 70. Which was
when you became, as my uncle Seymour Margulies, who was a judge, said, you became constitutionally senile. Right?
Correct. If I have a dive every time I've repeated that phrase, I'd be a rich man. Seymour Margulies, your uncle, is someone I appeared before several times and had wonderful conversations with him, and he was just a wonderful man. But yes, and there's a couple of other phrases he had gave to me, which I have posted in my office. But the being a judge was just a wonderful experience for me. I'm glad I had it towards the end of my career, as opposed to starting at age 30, you know, because I could bring my experience to the bench. But the concept, and I also often express this when somebody says, how is it to be a judge? And I said, quite frankly, it's very freeing in terms of the level of relaxation of the perspective of what you have as a judge. Because if you bottom line what a judge does, I mean, forget about, and of course not underemphasize the fact that it helped to know the law, it helped know how to read briefs, it helped know how to read and get beyond the briefs and really get the essence of what the case was about. But really, as a judge, instead of taking a position that you had to do as an attorney and then think about that and prepare it and spend hours in the preparation, if you were doing the job that I tried to do and you tried to, and many attorneys do, is thinking about it and what you may have forgotten. As a judge, the perspective was, all you have to do is the right thing. All you have to do is the right thing. And to me, that was tremendously free, mentally and spiritually and otherwise. As opposed to the concept of, if you had a tough case, a client that's paying, and trying to make a silk purse out of the sow's ear, you know, so it was a completely different perspective. And that aspect, for the 14 and a half years I served as a Superior Court judge at different levels, was a wonderful experience.
Well, I had the opportunity to see you from several perspectives, sitting in court and see you handle with pro se litigants special civil part matters, and I also participated in a 4-month billion-dollar case as local counsel that was probably the largest case in terms of money that you had. But tell us a little bit about any cases that you had that you think were particularly interesting.
Well, it's funny, but just talking about your experience, and again, of course, you became a judge. You started at the lower end of handling special civil part matters, okay, and then I was able to end my career as a presiding judge of the Chancery Division. The variation in those two types of cases bring to mind, by way of experience, how I enjoyed both aspects and every aspect of my practice. Starting with the last one first, which you were involved in, the billion-dollar case, which turned out to be a case which settled while the jury was deliberating after 4 months, involved a very, very complicated investment issue involving a fight between two brokers and a stealing of brokers from one end to another, and ultimately...
With every day in court, 11 lawyers on one side and 6 lawyers on the other side.
Yes. And then ultimately settling while the jury was deliberating for...
it was $100 million because I had to sign the order to guarantee the judgment.
So that was the first time I almost shook when I signed that order myself. But the being exposed to that type of case, again, these New York attorneys, New Jersey counsel, including yourself, where they would raise an issue that came up during the course of trial, and I said, well, I'd like you to brief that, can I have by tomorrow morning? This would be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, no problem. And they would have offices set up, in empty offices in the courthouse or elsewhere, and they would just work and have it ready for me to look at 9 o'clock the next morning.
They were law review style
Yes.
briefs. With, as I recall, one day it was like 4 boxes of documents. I mean, it was...
Yeah. So you compare that experience, which was a very technical case, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I think at the time I was specially assigned to handle complex commercial cases, which was before I went to the Chancery Division. But then you go back to the time when I was assigned to hear on one day of the week small claims cases. And they were joyful themselves. Again, most of the parties, the participants were pro se. And the one case that comes to mind is a woman who had a claim for, I think it was like $2,000 for personal property that was retained by her former boyfriend. They were living together one time. They split up. Certain things she contended were left in her boyfriend's apartment who would not return. So during the course of the trial, none was represented by an attorney, of course. And I said, the attorney said, "Well, you're asking for $2,000." I said, I don't see. You just mentioned a few things. I mean, the things mentioned in the plate. Why 1/2 package of Oreos, a quarter of a bottle of vodka. I says, do you have a more comprehensive list of what your claim for damages totaling $2,000 or $2,500? She says, funny you should mention that, Your Honor. She responded, yes, I have it right here. And she takes out of her purse a roll of toilet paper and says, I wrote them out on this toilet paper, and with aplomb, she takes the toilet paper, throws it up in the air. And I said, here's the list. I says, you had to write them on toilet paper? And her response, without blinking an eye, is, well, he treated me like S, and that's why I put it on the toilet paper. So with that, I just fell off the bench. I mean, I just couldn't hold it. So, I mean, being able to have exposed to those, we call them minor case, small claims cases, gave me a different kind of joy, but as much joy as hearing that complex commercial case that we spoke about. So I enjoyed every day of my
Once
life.
you became constitutionally senile, you actually joined my firm, Schumann, Hendel, Margulies, and you do different things. You do mediations and arbitrations, but you also, I don't know if you're a consigliere, but you also support one of the local mayor senators in your former town.
Yeah. Well, the answer is yes. That's you see, I'm special counsel, and I primarily supervise Mayor Stack's tenant advocate office. But and you're very kind to provide me the space, and I do handle arbitrations, mediations, some estate transactional work, and I thank you and Mr. Boff for providing that space to me. But of course, part of the enjoyment of this aspect of my semi-retirement is being able to still maintain contact with colleagues like yourself. On the other side, dealing with lawyers, good lawyers on arbitrations or mediations, and then dealing with people who need assistance, and I'm able to tap into my 50-year experience to try to assist them in landlord-tenant problems that they're having. It also gives me, I have to mention this, is that it gives me a little bit more time. In other words, I've always gauged the hours in my 50-plus year career, and it was exponentially, as a young lawyer going up to the judgeship, it was like sometimes 60 to 70-hour weeks. Then it became somewhat less, say 40 hours, 45 hours as a judge, okay? And now I've got it down and get to maybe 20 or 25 hours a week. And it gives me the opportunity to at least spend more time with my wife, with my 2 adult children, my grandchildren, my son Clark, who's a lawyer, and Laura, who's in North Carolina, and my 3 wonderful grandchildren. So I was in a good place from the beginning of my career to being in a good and great place day to day right now as a semi-retired judge.
Sounds like life is good. Let me ask this. You've had the opportunity to see Hudson County develop. Hudson County has a ripe history going back hundreds of years, but see how the judicial system and the law system has developed. What observations do you have after 50 years of practice, as to the legal community?
Well, it's vast. I mean, quite frankly. I mean, you know, and it's not to belittle the practice now as it exists now as it did in our time. Sometimes we wax very emotionally and about what the way it was, okay? But I would say, you know, the development up to the day, you know, let's say the first 30 years of my practice as a lawyer was mentored to me, certainly in the beginning, by well-seasoned attorneys or judges, like your uncle, Seymour Margulies. Like, these names are not going to be not mean to you, but not mean to people who may be watching this video. Bill Rivetto, who I had my first trial against, okay?
Who was a consummate insurance defense lawyer and a lovely guy.
And a lovely, lovely guy. And, you know, things that would happen during the courtroom, and he would pull me aside and say, try to do it this way, because I was having a problem getting a piece of evidence in.
And he was your adversary.
He was my adversary. You know, that type of collegiality is something that you were taught by your mentors, self-appointed mentors, which was fine with me. And I'm not sure I see that as much as existed in those days, and I think it's sorely missed. So what happens is you have an approach which every dog for themselves, so to speak, and you know, it becomes a little less collegial.
Maybe a little less professional, a little more business.
Yeah, exactly. And now, with the whole aspects of, forget about, you know, these books that we have surrounding us that you may be able to see in the video are really obsolete because all this information is online now. But the next step over the last 5 years, which is fascinating, is how artificial intelligence is going to play into how you prepare for a case and present a position to a judge. I mean, I'm just beginning to study that because sometimes I have to do some brief work. Though I can't appear in court, I do some preparation for other attorneys. And it's, you know, it's a scary tool. So that's something that I've noticed in terms of this progression in my career.
Are there any other lawyers or judges over the years that come to mind that were particularly interesting or characters?
Oh,
I'm thinking of Izzy Michelle.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's one. He appeared before me as a judge. I had him as a quote adversary, and again, he was a fixture, a very funny guy who was a part-time musician. He had his own band. So, you know, you understood who he was, and you dealt with that. You didn't deal and say, oh, how can he not be prepared? I mean, you just knew that. And, I mean, as I said, other than the lawyers who I mentioned and the mentors that I had, you know, experiences with judges who at the time when I was practicing, Judge Walsh, for example, Judge O'Brien was an assignment judge. The former, not the former, he was a law division judge, his name escapes me now, but, you know, it was just a pleasure to deal with these judges that sort of kept out their ante you, and Judge Taylor comes to mind, for example. Your uncle, of course, comes up to mind. But, you know, these were wonderful, positive experiences, and they do stand in my mind. And, you know, though I can't appear before them, it's always nice if they're still around to chat with them. And if I can't chat with them, hopefully we recorded them on oral history and we could see what they had to say.
Well, thank you for your service, both your military service and your service to the bench and the bar, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Same here. Thank you, Robert.